welcome back to Thought Tapestry. I'm your host, Stephanie, and I'm here with Keisha, and we are here to talk to you about something that we know quite a bit about, and that is the Roswell Incident. How are you today, Kiki?
I'm doing great. Sunny out here. It's good.
Sometimes you gotta just love California.
You do.
But we are talking about the deserts of New Mexico, so I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. So the Roswell incident occurred during what was known as the flying disc craze of 1947. And during that time, there were 16 or more alleged sightings of UFOs reported in the U.S. between May and July, most of those occurring in the American Southwest. It was against this background, sometime between mid-June and early July, that a rancher known as W.W. Mack, Brazil, discovered some unusual debris near his ranch in Roswell, New Mexico. So, a little bit about this city. Keisha and myself spent our childhood here, so we're intimately familiar with kind of how the city works. It is a very small town, so things do not change dramatically or rapidly. So even though we grew up in like 80s, 90s, it was probably functioning, the city, very similar to the 1947 city, which is crazy to say.
Extremely accurate.
I mean, and if you're from a small town, you're going to know exactly what I mean when I say that. Okay. So anyway, the material that, we're just going to call him Mac, the rancher Mac from this point out. The material that he found included tinfoil, rubber strips, and sticks. And he didn't really think too much of it initially, other than it was weird. But he as he kind of time went on and he started to consider where this stuff could have come from, it did spook him a little bit. So after about a month, and he actually did end up contacting the Roswell sheriff, who then in turn contacted the Roswell Army Airfield. They collected the wreckage and issued a press release that stated a flying disc had been retrieved from a local ranch. As you can imagine, because we were in the midst of this UFO craze, that little headline sparked a fire, and the Roswell Daily Record picked up the press release, and on July 8th, the story was printed with the headline, RAAF captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell. So counterintelligence court agents, known as CIC during this time, their names were Lieutenant Colonel Sheridan W. Cabot, and then M. Sergeant Lewis Rickett, and then Army Air Force intelligence agent Major Jesse A. Marcel investigated the reports that they received once the kind of news of this saucer hit the desk of the feds. And they came to Roswell and started kind of looking at things, and essentially was the team that kicked off the investigation. So the three men traveled to Brazil's ranch and collected numerous pieces of what Cabot later described as bamboo sticks and a reflective sort of material like aluminum foil. And that's kind of what they say that they took away from the crash site whenever they went. So the same day, while this is all happening, so kind of the timeline here is a little weird, and I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about how small this town is, because I can absolutely see no one hustling to kind of get the news out about this. I can definitely see it being a lot of gossip amongst the town members, but them not kind of understanding the big implications of it. So things are moving fast and slow. But anyway, by the time, like I said, once the headline hit the news wire, so to speak, it did kind of cause like a huge panic outside of New Mexico. Everyone outside of New Mexico was like, oh my God, they're here, right? The excitement was short-lived because the same day, someone by the name of Brigadier General, so you know this is old school, later known as Lieutenant General, his name is Roger Ramey, commander of the 8th Air Force at Fort Worth, Army airfield, held a press conference announcing that the discovered materials belonged to a weather balloon, and that and because of this, the incident was quickly forgotten and subsequently faded from headlines. That is until 1978, when Marcel, remember him, he was part of the investigating team, claimed in an interview with UFOologists, which are basically researchers of UFOs, that the materials that they found were extraterrestrial. After that, more witnesses came forward following the publication of his claims, and UFO enthusiasts kind of started to grab onto the story with fervor. And so this was like about a 30-year period, right? So 1947 happened. It got the townsfolk up in arms. They took photos, like people were trying to take pieces of it away. And then I guess it's the Army, kind of officially came out literally the next day, shut it all down and said, no, it was just an air weather balloon. And so the townspeople went about their lives. And towards the end of his life, Marcel starts talking about the fact that, no, here's the truth. The stuff that we did recover wasn't anything that I'd ever seen before. This then caused other witnesses to start coming forward saying that they'd seen UFOs, that they were kind of corroborating his story, so forth and so on. That said, his account does remain the basis for conspiratists of a major military cover-up of extraterrestrial life at Roswell. Shortly after the 1947 incident, Marcel's personal file, so they updated his personal file to say that he was unreliable and had a tendency to exaggerate. This literally happened right after the incident occurred. And then Conor Cavett, who was working with him, said, I don't think I even made a report to the CIC headquarters, which I normally would have if there was anything at all unusual. Okay. So then we're going to skip ahead a little bit, a couple of years, and this book comes out. It's called The Roswell Incident. It's published in like the 80s, and the authors basically go on to say in the book that the weather balloon explanation is a cover story, and they kind of pull in all of these resources from a bunch of different places, right? And that's the book, and I don't know why. Maybe it's because it was in like book form. That's the thing that really people have held on to in terms of the government covering up whatever happened in Roswell. And the thing about it, and this is what I found, I have a lot. I can't wait till we actually start gossiping about this because I have so many thoughts about this. So that book has just had a foothold since the 80s. That's the one that people refer to over and over. It's got like witness accounts. It's got a whole bunch of stuff. It's like a wealth of information to people that believe in UFOs. But then what's crazy is like 15 years later, the Army again comes out of the Air Force, actually out of nowhere. They come out and they release this report, which they conceded that the weather balloon story had been bogus. So they admit that the weather balloon story was bogus. This is what they said it was. They said that the wreckage came from a spy device created for an until then classified project called Project Mogul. The device, which was apparently a connected string of high-altitude balloons equipped with microphones, was designed to float furtively over the USSR. To detect sound waves and kind of determine like stealth distance. The balloons would ostensibly monitor the Soviet government's attempts at testing their own atomic bomb. And in the summer of 1947, per this report, these tests of the balloons were occurring at Alamogordo Army Airfield, which is now called Holloman Air Force Base, and during which time they said that they lost some of the balloons. Project engineer Professor Charles B. Moore confirmed that witness descriptions and photographs of the recovered Roswell UFO were consistent with the materials used in some of those balloons. Project Mogul researchers reportedly used radio broadcasts of UFO sightings during the 1947 disc craze to locate the lost balloons. And because the project was a covert operation, the report claimed that a false explanation of the crash was necessary to prevent any details being given away. And so that's kind of the official story of the Roswell incident. Do we want to go into Area 51, or should we just chat it up a little bit about our thoughts on the incident?
We could chat it up a bit on this.
Okay.
So, the first thing that, since we are both from there, and you did bring up a valid point that although we are in 2025, I'm pretty sure we can go back to Roswell And, it's a small time vibe. We're kind of a ways away from any metropolitan city, so we're kind of a little bit isolated and landlocked.
Mhm.
So I could see back then in 1947, this rancher going out, discovering all this debris, and being like, ooh, what is this? And for one, you said it was like some bamboo or something like that.
Yeah, that's
So I could
yeah,
see, the untrained eye of a person that would be like, what the hell is this? I've never seen this kind of stick before. It's kind of
yeah,
sturdy.
yeah. Especially in the
Um,
desert. Yeah,
in the desert where you don't see bamboo, and if you have seen bamboo, it was probably some kind of decoration or something. You mean,
furniture.
you
Yes.
know, it wasn't
Yeah.
like laying about. But yeah, we like to call that oops. It must have been a weather balloon theory. So that has been ingrained into the Roswell incident more so because people were like in disbelief, right? Um, they feel like they couldn't see. They wanted to do like so many investigations on, okay, let's test the material. What kind of material was it? What kind of like, was it aluminum? What was it? In all, to this day, really people have like a conflict of really, was it a weather balloon or was it a UFO? But just personally, with growing up with all that mysticism around New Mexico and just the lights. I mean, there's so much lore in the state that we live in
Mhm.
because we have the indigenous people. Being the land of enchantment, people often are really enchanted about the land in general. So the Roswell incident did bring a lot of eyes and ears to our region, right? And made it a very popular place to be.
It did. There we do. Okay, well, it's already to your point. There is something to be said because I was gonna pull out a whole bunch of like stats and whatnot about the state of New Mexico because one of the things that there's a couple of things. A lot of people, and I don't know how true this is anymore, but I would tell people that I was from New Mexico. They would always just like pause and then say like Mexico because they didn't even realize that New Mexico is a state. Um,
Exactly.
and because of that, it's interesting because it's a huge land state. It's like the size of basically Arizona or Colorado, but it is sparsely populated, right?
Exactly.
So
I
you
like to
can
call it big square, little square.
big square, little square. So you could drive through New Mexico on any given street realistically, and once you get away from kind of like the small towns, you could literally be on those highways and not encounter a single person for hours. There's just not any place in America where that's going to happen. But here's my thing. I do hear what you're saying about the materials being kind of like exotic, so maybe that's why they if it was just a weather balloon, they would have been like kind of confused. But I personally feel like, let's be honest, if we were already at this point in time savvy enough to know that we needed to build something to spy on the Russians, do you really tell me that the materials that we were going to be using were going to freaking be bamboo and aluminum foil?
I get you. I get you.
Like
And
that's
even
what we're
with the
using?
aluminum foil, like, I don't know when aluminum foil was invented, and I don't think it would be something that I would use as far as a weather balloon. Just me, I'm not an engineer of any sort, but that wouldn't be the material that I would use, I don't think.
I agree.
So I get what you're saying. Like, yeah, like,
Like
what is
things
this?
weren't. I mean, in the 40s, there's no way that things. I mean, especially because Isaac, that's just post Cold War, so you know we were already thinking about ways to kind of create things that would give us the leg up. There's no
Exactly.
way in my mind you can convince me that they thought that some aluminum foil like material and some bamboo was going to do it. So already there, I'm like, somebody's lying. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Here's the other
Yeah.
thing I
Somebody's
think too
lying.
is that if to me the report came out too soon because if you really wanted to do some investigation it wouldn't have been such a simplified explanation immediately, right? Like if you really wanted to kind of look into something and didn't want to shut it down, it would have taken, especially in this small ass town in the 40s, a little more time. You know, like I
Yeah.
said, like living in a small town, things run very slowly. So for them to be able to get on the good foot with this, again, something in my little brain is pinging like, huh, what was the rush? You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, there was a rush, definitely.
You know? Okay.
Yes.
And then third for me is the fact that it's kind of the timeline on when the rancher found the stuff and when it was kind of reported, right? There's a lot of conflict. Like, the reports say that essentially on July 7th, notification was made that this had been found. But we know, or per other reports, it's like he stated that he found him sometime in June. So that's like a 2-week period where a lot could have happened. And this, I'm going to say it. I believe that during that 2-week period, they were trying to figure out what type of life forms they were looking at, make sure that they could kind of contain anything weird, and then they were determining the plan to move those motherfuckers.
Okay, so you're talking about the cover-up aspect of it.
The cover-up aspect of it. I feel like all of this story was a cover-up. And I say that because it just, none of it makes sense. None of it makes sense in terms of like two things. And this is, I think, my journalism brain pinging. None of it makes sense because I'm like, again, how are you so certain less than 24 hours later that what they had found wasn't what he assumed it to be? You know what I mean?
Right.
Less than 24 hours later, you're like, no, it's not a UFO, it's a weather balloon. Okay.
Right.
But then it took up until 1994. And I don't know how long documents stay classified or don't. I do know that the CIA declassifies documents all the time. And we're going to talk about the fact that they finally admitted aliens exist. So I don't think we even have to kind of dance around that on this pod, right? But I do think that from 1947 to 1994 is a long time. Why did it take so long for you to just say, hey, our official story is the weather balloon story was bogus. Here's what.
Right.
And I think the reason why it took so long is because they needed another story because no one was really buying the fact that there weren't little green men on Earth. And they had to create a whole thing. They had to create Project Mogul. And that could be what they pointed back to if and when we started kind of really needing the questions answered. That's my theory. I do believe that aliens crash landed here. And it's funny because during some of the research, I had to get on the Reddit threads. They were like, well, if like they're so technologically advanced, why would they crash at all? But I think about that. And if you like, so maybe their technology in terms of our technology was like, let's just say light years ahead. But back then, it would have still been very simplistic technology in terms of the evolution of that species. Yes. Are you still with me?
I agree. I'm here with you.
So it's like, maybe this was their test run. Maybe this was their test run. And because there's never been another site, like crash landing. There's never been another crash landing in America. So maybe that was them saying, oop, we effed up. Let's make sure that never happens.
Let's make it better.
Let's make it better. Okay. So I also do want to talk about Area 51 because in addition to them taking forever to give us an official story about them not being balloons, basically to say that they lied, there's this Area 51, which I think a lot of people kind of conflate with the Roswell incident, and they are separate. But I think there's a through line. Okay. So a little bit about Area 51. It's a military installation located at Groom Lake in southern Nevada that was created during, again, the Cold War between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. And this is just for all of you weirdos listening right now that for some reason think anything that our current president is doing with the Soviets is okay. It has never been okay. It will never be okay. Sorry, I just have to go off a little bit because everything I'm reading is talking about how all of this is like happening around the time of the Cold War, which we've always been at war with these motherfuckers.
Always.
They are not our friends. They are not
every time.
allies.
Girl, yes.
Okay. Anyway, so this is when this base was created, and it was created as a testing and development facility for aircraft, including one called like U-2 and another called like the SR-71 Blackbird. These are all
Yes.
reconnaissance planes because, again,
Mhm.
we're at war with who? Russia.
Russia.
Anyway, so Area 51 is administered by Edwards Air Force Base, which is actually located in Southern California. Some facts about the facility. It's next to two other restricted military sites. There's one called the Nevada Test Site, and that's where we test nukes straight up. We did it from the 50s to the 90s. It's supposedly shut down. Who the hell really knows?
Hmm.
And then there's also the Nevada Test and Training Range, and the range covers more than 2.9 million acres of land. That is
Mm-hmm.
that just sitting out in the West, girl.
Just
2.9 million
just
acres.
millions of acres just uninhabited, just sprawling.
Uninhabited, but who knows what's really going on out there. So, according to the US military, supposedly it represents a flexible, realistic, and multidimensional battle space to conduct testing tactics, development, and advanced training. So that's why they say they need all the space. Okay, so Area
Hmm.
51 has been the focus of numerous conspiracies involving ET. Um, it's only ever been confirmed to be used as a testing facility, but for years there was speculation about it, especially when the reports about UFOs kind of started growing. Because obviously Nevada and New Mexico are they're close. Those are close states, and so if they're flying over the desert, they're flying over the desert. The site became known as Area 51, which was the designation on maps of the Atomic Energy Commission. Conspiracy theorists gained support in the 80s when a man alleging to have worked at the installation claimed that the government was examining recovered alien spacecraft. Okay.
Hmm.
In 2013, the US government and the CIA officially acknowledged the existence of Area 51, although it had actually opened in 1955. And 4 months after the CIA's disclosure, President Obama was the first US president to ever publicly mention the area.
Hmm.
Um, that year, the same year in 2013, the National Security Archive at George Washington University had changed FOIA, which is basically a Freedom of Information Act, to basically have the CIA declassify any documents around what was going on there, etc. And according to that report, the remote site, which included an airfield not used by the military since World War One, was again just kind of selected to be used as a testing site. So essentially, the declassified documents were just stating that what happened at Area 51 was just testing so that our enemies couldn't know what we were up to.
Hmm.
However, I do believe the story that it was also used to kind of examine recovered alien spacecraft because, in terms
Yes.
of the timeline, so the UFO incident happens, right?
Hmm.
1947 immediately, like, it gets quashed, like, hey, nothing's happening over here, look away, look away, it's a weather balloon, calm your tits. Between 1947 and 1954 we didn't hear anything, and
Right.
in 1954, like, they released kind of confirmation saying that it was weather balloons. That's when we got the first official on the record lie that it was weather balloons. And we can call it a lie because they admitted later that it was, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
But immediately after 1954, when they released that statement, they opened Area 51.
Hmm.
Okay, which is just
Hmm.
a little bit of ways away from where this occurred, right? They have all this land, they buy all this land suddenly after this incident has occurred in the desert. And I don't even actually know when testing started happening in terms of it being like a military kind of testing grounds. Research I found says that didn't start happening until the 80s. And so if
Hmm.
that's true, what was happening there for 30 years?
That's a good question. That is a great question, Stephanie. I was thinking about this while you're telling the story, and I'm also, I'm putting myself into like the devil's advocate mode of it all. I like to do this a lot. You know
Yeah,
this.
let's do it.
So if I was the government at that time, I think that I don't know when War of the Worlds came out. Was that in the 1930s? or was it in the 40s as well? Do you know a
War
date
of
when
the
the War of the
Worlds. I feel like it. I kind of feel like it was even later. But
later?
let's look it up because I feel like it was like the 50s, 60s.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna look it up right now.
Because if I feel like
Oh, it was. It was in the 50s, 53.
okay, so at that time, like we hadn't even had like any kind of scares with it being a government agency, right? The U.S. government. How did they know to, what was their thoughts on, what do you think, and these are conspiracies, what do you think they were thinking about covering it up? What was the benefit of them covering it up? Did they think there was going to be mass hysteria? What were they really trying to
Yes,
cover
I
up? Did they think
do.
people were just going to start jumping out the window? What do you think?
Great question. And I got thoughts. I
Uh-huh.
actually literally think that it would have been too much of distraction away from our enemies, which was Russia. They wanted people locked in. They wanted people patriotic. They wanted people to be 10 toes in for the government and whatever the government was maybe going to have to do if shit re escalated post the Cold War. I think they wanted the Americans very, very focused on patriotism and not some shit that they weren't going to be able to really kind of tackle yet. You know what I mean?
Ooh.
But I also feel like this had to have kind of kicked off, and I mean, I didn't do a ton of research, but it had to have kicked off like formal kind of study or research into the area because again we know that the CIA has officially released documents saying yeah they've been out there flying in the sky for a while.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
that's
Mm-hmm.
why I think they were just like, this isn't something we're prepared to give you an answer to. We need you guys focused on our true enemy because at this point, like it was really like talk about like civic pride. Like we were all about the military, all about like being the best, all about war. You know what I mean? So they could not have
Mm-hmm.
the citizens kind of eyes take their eyes off the prize. That's what I think.
Okay, and
Mm-hmm.
I get it. I get it. But also too as a civilian, like aren't we supposed to be protected by our government? Aren't they supposed to be the boots on the ground? Aren't they supposed to be the ones that are in the know of what's coming or they can be
Can
foreboding?
I
Like,
tell you something? And I love that you asked that question. And I love that we have this podcast because I love that we can just talk about all the shit we would talk about normally. So yesterday I posted this TikTok because it just came to me. And I just, at this point, I'm not holding back. I'm just getting it all out. Anything that comes to me, either on this podcast, either in my journal, either on TikTok, I've been suppressed and repressed too long. But I posted this TikTok saying, like, if 9/11 happened September of this year, how do you think
ooh,
Americans would show up?
oof.
Girl, could you imagine? And
Oh,
here's the thing.
dang.
I know
Mm-hmm.
that's what I said. And that pit, that feeling that you felt before you even thought through shit, that's how we would show up. And it's not great. But then obviously I got off TikTok and I was actually thinking about that for a little bit longer. And I was like, and could we even trust this administration to tell us that the shit had hit the fan if it did?
No, because guess what? Just like oops, it was a weather balloon, girl. Oops, it would be
Yes.
something else. Like oops. And there's a lot of things, even with this current administration, that they have been doing that it's really like rookie. A
Yeah.
lot of
And
rookiness going on.
covert. And the
Covert.
thing about it is they won't even own it. So like your question is about transparency and I think the
Right.
answer is American government has never been transparent with its people. They
At
will
all.
lie to us for
Ooh.
decades. You know what I mean?
Decades. Girl, centuries, hell.
Yes, for centuries until they deem that we are ready to know. And
They're
that's why I
like,
think
and
it's
who,
so
and you know what I'm saying? Like the readiness of it, of a person, you can't gauge that. You gotta kind of give people, some benefit of the doubt. Like we can handle some stuff. Really, we have handled so many atrocities in this world. People know that things happen. People can kind of understand the correlation between things that we unseen and what we do see. And a lot of people are afraid of the things that we can't see. But if they were to be like, okay, there are some things you can't see, but we've been existing this whole time without any war of the world, so to speak. So I think that if they would have just told us, been honest, it would have actually given us a whole different perspective on, okay, there are some other things otherworldly out there outside of our planet Earth. And then I think we could have really been, a little bit more in the know. I don't know. That's personally what I think.
I
I
love it.
think that keeping people in the dark is like, that's a bad thing. Because then when things pop off and then people do get in hysterics, but if you let them know, okay, yeah, there's some other stuff going on. Yes, we did recover this balloon, we recovered these bodies, we're doing the investigation. In about 10 years, give us some time, we'll let you know, but we'll give you updates. I don't know, girl. I don't know what they have could have done, but I think it could have been they could have done a better job. And just think about, like, while we're talking about the Roswell incident, there's also been other incidents, although they haven't been to alien autopsies that came out of the Roswell incident.
You are so optimistic, and I love it. I actually am now more than ever convinced that I am an optimistic realist because just of how we approach life. Like, I hear you say they should have told us and we could have. And here's my thing, and not to make it about race, but I got to go there. There are people that can't even handle people of different skin tones. No, girl. Like, you think they're going to be able to handle a different colored species? I don't think so. I don't think so. We're not there. And let's talk about that too, because I know they're here. I saw a spaceship. I did see a spaceship, and it was in Roswell. And
Okay.
there was 4 of us driving to a party late at night. And like we were saying earlier, when you're driving around in this state, like, if it's nighttime, you're navigating by the stars and the moon because it's dark AF and there's just not a lot of lights out, and you really just got to know where the heck you're going.
Oh yeah, Roswell in general, there's like not a lot of street lights at all. It's
Yeah,
very dark.
it's a dark,
Yeah.
dark ass small town.
Dark as hell.
And back then too, we didn't have our maps. So, we were literally traveling by the light of the moon, literally.
The light of the moon.
And so
yes.
we're headed to, I don't know, some rancher kids house party or whatever. And of course, because it's a ranch, it's even farther away from city lights. So it's super dark. So I'm sitting on the right-hand side of the car in the back seat. And I'm just like looking at the stars and the moon because I'm a star moony girl.
Mm-hmm.
And I see this thing that at first was kind of behind us. And I saw what first caught my eye was like a red light. And so I was like, oh, it's a plane. I assumed that it was a plane, but it didn't pass us, right? Like, instead, it came kind of from behind us and then started keeping pace with us. And so that's what really caught my attention because I was like, why is that plane floating up in the sky? And then right after I thought that, I looked again and I was like, is that literally said that in my head? And then I started hitting my friend that's sitting behind me. I'm like, Shelly, look outside. And then she leans over me, and as she looks outside, it darts off and it's gone forever. Gone forever. But I know for a fact that I saw an alien spaceship.
Oh,
and
no, you totally did, girl. There's a lot of...
Yes, they're clearly out here. Well, and in the 90s, we used to get a lot more kind of, and 80s, right? Like, because I think after, what's really funny, okay, speaking of like this timeline, so things kind of died down in the 40s or whatever, and then, like we were saying, got kind of really kicked up in the 80s because that Roswell Incident book came out, and I think that's also when we started hearing about like abductions, etc. And I have a theory about that too. I feel like...
Oh, yes, let's talk about it.
I feel like the aliens, I mean, after the crash landing, right, they learned their lesson. They're like, damn, they caught us, they saw us.
Yeah.
The next time we do this, we gotta just make sure we know what we're doing. So they went away for a while, right? They perfected their technology. They come back and they're like, we're interested in this space that we found ourselves in, right? Mm-hmm. Like, they didn't necessarily freak out maybe as much as we anticipated they would. They were real chill about it. And so they're like, let's kind of examine these people. Who are they? What are they? And so then they start taking us. They start taking us back. They really kind of want to understand what makes us as a species works, right? And
Mhm.
this is happening throughout the 80s and throughout the 90s, and I believe it's happening, okay?
Oh
And
yeah.
then all of a sudden it stops happening. And I think
Hmm.
the reason why it stopped happening is because we, as Americans specifically, stopped evolving.
Oh gosh. Okay. Okay. Okay.
Right?
All right,
Okay.
Stephanie. I'm hearing you. I'm hearing
Okay,
you.
right?
I'm feeling you.
Stay with me. Stay with me.
Yeah.
Because I
Mm-hmm.
also feel like that is why we see so much
Mm.
activity in the sky, but we don't actually see them amongst us in like what we can visibly identify as extraterrestrial. And I feel
Mm-hmm.
like it's because now word is out that we are such an effed species. And so them buzzing by our skies is literally like them watching a reality TV show. Like
Oh
they have told their
wow.
friends and they're like,
They
no, you
told
guys
all the
gotta
homies
see
like,
this.
yo, don't be messing around there around
Come
57th and Western. Don't 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 make that wrong turn at
get
Albuquerque
off,
because you know we
yes.
did that. We've been there
Get
and we
off
saw.
MLK Boulevard, guys. Like,
Oh,
no.
don't get
But
off on MLK. Just keep going past the light.
drive past it.
Oh
But that's what they're
gosh.
doing. Now they're not observing us because we're
Okay.
interesting. They're observing us because we're a shit show. And they're like, you
Oof.
guys gotta see what this intelligent, high functioning society has devolved into. And so that's what they're doing. They're bringing the
Oof.
homies to kind of watch us make a fucking fool of
Oof.
ourselves.
Oh my gosh, like The Watchers. Did you watch that movie?
I did. I
Oh my
did.
word.
Oh my god. Yes.
Mm,
That's what I think is going on. And I don't think they're malevolent. I don't think they're
right.
evil. I really feel like they are, to them now where we're at, we're really like babies. Like we're like, look at those little tiny dumb things. Forgive them for what
Yes,
they're doing
definitely.
to their
And think
planet, you
about it.
know?
Like, what if, because we know our little our movie Mars Attacks, but you know how it was. Like it was like, what? So, okay, the aliens have understood now that we are not really evolving. They were interested. They found us somehow. They got, into our, solar
Yeah.
system. They
Crash
they
landed into
crashed, landed, and
yeah.
then years later, your theory is, or the conspiracy theory is that they
I like the
came
word
and,
theory. I don't think it's a
or
conspiracy because
okay,
listen,
the
everything's up.
conspiracy
The
is
theory
that
is
they came and they saw and they were like interested and they were like, okay, let's take these humans and study them because we want to know what's up with them, how do they work, how do they reproduce, what,
mm-hmm.
they're dissecting us perhaps and putting us back together.
Yep. Yep.
I have a friend that I met in Washington, and she is one of those people that says that she definitely was abducted by aliens. And
What? You have
sh
never told me this. I'm
I
so
never
excited to
told you
hear
about
this
my friend.
story.
Oh, my friend is she's something else. But girl, she really is one of those people, like, because we think of the people that have, like, they're kooky or they're
Mm-hmm.
mentally ill. This
Yep.
girl, she doesn't have any of that. She's a straight shooter, level headed. She was a criminal justice major. So there's no fuckery there.
Yeah.
So she would tell me these stories. We would be sitting around and she would be telling me, she's like, do you believe in aliens? This is before she knew where I was from. And I told her, I was like, I'm from Roswell, New Mexico. And she was like, she's like, so do you believe in aliens? And I was like, yes, I do. And at that time, because I hadn't seen any alien activity in New Mexico, but I did see
Mm.
alien activity in Washington.
Ah!
So I told her about that and I said, there's a lot, and Washington is a strange place and at its own for a later date. But I remember going with a boyfriend, a guy I was dating at the time, and we were out cruising. It's dark as hell in Washington as well, and so we went to this place where this huge lake. It's overlooking a lake, and we were like on the overlook, just looking out at the lake, chilling, possibly necking, who knows. Um, so we were looking
You
out,
said necky girl.
necking, necking. But girl, we were out there and this object goes like, I looked to at first, I thought it was a shooting star. And I was like, oh, because I like the stars and the moon too, girly. So I'm looking out. It shoots across, and then you can see the lake is so crystal clear. There's not even a ripple, just nothing. And then all of a sudden, it just kind of hovers, and you can see the reflection of the
Mm.
objects into the water, and it just hovered. And I said, let's get the hell out of here. And I remember like thinking like we didn't say anything to each other about it. But days later, I was like, what do you think we saw? And he's like, I don't want to talk about it. And I was like, okay. I know I'm not crazy because you
Oh
know what I know.
wow, I that's
You
crazy.
know what I
But you
know,
know
but
what's
it was
so
crazy.
interesting is I feel like you probably had the same thing, like the same experience that I did, because there was this moment where I was looking at it and I was like, oh, a plane. And then
Hmm.
like my subconscious, before my conscious even like got there, my subconscious was like, oh fuck. What the
Yeah, because
heck
you
is
can't
that?
even imagine like, okay, there's nothing that can hover like this
Yes. Yes.
UFO. Nothing
Yes.
can do that.
There it
I've
couldn't
seen
be anything
planes
else. Yep.
been close, we've seen planes. We see how the patterns go. Even where I was living up there, it was the Naval Air Station. So there's
Yeah, girl, we
constantly
used to go
planes.
to air shows when we were a kid.
We
Like we
used to go to
know
work.
how
Yeah, we know how planes
planes
fly. But girl,
operate.
that was
Yeah.
something. It was a sphere. It had to be like a silver color all around. It had no lights. It was a light in itself. I don't know. It had its own
Oh,
light.
that's interesting. Yeah, no, mine was a sphere too, but it was like a flat sphere, like a clam
Yeah.
shaped. And it also it had red and green lights. And at
Mm,
first, when it was just kind of floating behind us, all I could the only the red lights were. And so that's why I thought of
mm.
a plane, because I'm like, but it was that hover, to your point. It was just like, what the heck is
It's
that? And
just
then it was
hanging
like
out and
just
silver
starts to
and
dawn on
beautiful.
you.
But yeah, I
Yeah.
never forget it. I will never forget it as long as I live.
Me
But
either.
back to my
Oh
friend.
yes, tell me what your
She
girl.
says that she has this like thing where she believes that she has been abducted by aliens. And I was like asking her, girl, what, okay, so how do you know? And she's like, well, when I was asleep sometimes, like I would see this huge beam of light and they would just beam me up. They would do what they needed to do and they would put me back in my bed. And then I started the thing that tipped me off, because she did say, she's like, feel right here. And it was in the back of her right ear. There's a little like a square, it feels like a square chip, like right under the skin. And she said, do you know that? She's like, do you feel that? And I said, yeah. I was like, what is that? She's like, this is my chip. It's my microchip. They planted in me. And she's like, she told me she had been to many like doctors and physicians, and everybody was saying the same thing. There's nothing there. There's nothing underneath the skin. Although you can feel it. They all
Yeah.
acknowledge that it's something they can feel, but it's not something that she can remove. I promise
Oh
you.
man, that's
And so
crazy.
she says like sometimes she loses time. Like she doesn't know, like she may go to bed at 8 o'clock and then she'll wake up a day later.
A
And
full
it's not
ass day
like
down.
she misses days and time.
Does she
Time stands still.
feel? Oh my god, time stands still. Like talk. Okay, well, I want to talk about that a little bit more. But does she feel like she's being watched at all, or does she just
I think,
feel?
and see, this is my thing with aliens and just even with the different, when people disappear, there's always some commonalities between these people. The commonalities are they have some kind of ailment, like they had a broken arm or they had a broken leg, or they are like kind of functioning high or they're functioning low. If you listen to some of the podcasts, I don't know what the gentleman's name is, but he does a lot of them about around the national parks. And
Oh
he
yes, yes.
but
Like
she said that
what better
she did break
place?
her arm when she was little, and so that she we kind of put these pieces together. And this is even back in the 90s when we were putting these pieces together, because
Well,
girl,
that's
she had
because
so many
that's when it
stories.
was happening.
Uh-huh.
So do you
Yeah.
think that I feel like that's actually even more evidence to me about them being kind of like altruistically interested in us, because what better way than to kind of see how we heal, right? Like, how does this thing get like grow
Yes.
back together?
Yes.
You know what I
And
mean?
that's what I
Or
think too, because I was saying, yes, girl. I said they are interested in you for some reason. And she's like, she's like, certain times they won't come around. And I forgot what the time frame was that they wouldn't come around. But then she told me, like, when she was up in Washington, she said, oh, they're here, they're around. And she's like, even more than when I was in Colorado. And even when she lived in
wow.
Phoenix, that's where it started.
Ooh, that's when she was
And
first
it followed
adopted.
her when she moved to Colorado Springs, and then when she moved up to Washington, it continued to happen. And I asked her, like, which place did you get the most like activity? And she was saying, like, it was kind of it ramped up in her when she was living in Colorado Springs.
Interesting. So
So
did she remember feeling the chip since Phoenix, or when does she remember feeling the chip?
she remembers feeling the chip like from way back, from I guess when the first time she got abducted.
Ah, so yeah, so then they would have been able to kind of keep track on her.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I believe that. I do. Like I said, I believe these stories are real. I'm quite certain that they were very interested in us at one point, but that has, much like the rest of the world that we live in, devolved. And I feel like one of the reasons that they were interested in us is because theoretically we're a nation of mixed bag, right? And so if you're
Mm-hmm.
thinking in terms of like galaxies and what actually lives outside of the Milky Way, there's probably going to be other things out there, other beings, again, that are going to be different colors and whatnot. And maybe to them, America was like the closest thing to that, because
Yes,
we
yes,
are the least homogenous
yes.
country on the planet, right? And
Right,
so maybe to
right.
them that was kind of like interesting, and it's like, yeah, let's learn everything we can about them. And then, like I said, over time they're like, whoa, whoa,
Like
whoa,
a petri dish,
what's
girl. They were
what's
like, let's go
happening
see what
though?
it is. They have all these different kind of people from different places, all in one place.
Yes,
They
all
didn't
in
have
one
to go
place.
all
They
around,
nowhere. They
you
could
know?
just pick like in
Just
this
one stop shop, girl.
and
One
we've
stop
talked
shop.
about this. America's land is huge. Like, it's
Hmm.
huge. So even to
It
them,
is.
even like, if they're traveling at light speed, it's still going to be a bit of a journey
Yeah,
because it's so
yeah,
big anyway. And so,
yeah.
yeah, that's what I think happened. And then we just start devolving, and they're like, now they're just kind of laughing at us, and they buzz by just to like get a good laugh and then go dip and do
They keep on going.
other intergalactic stuff. Like, they're actually probably writing in their history books about us. Like, this is how
Oh
a smart species
gosh.
becomes a dumb species. Like, you know what I
Oh
mean?
my gosh. Stephanie, this is interesting. So you're saying, okay, so I'm imagining them having like this intergalactic like forum, and they're
Yeah.
like, they can't come sip with us. We can't, like NATO. Like
Yes. Like, what is it?
Brexit. They're like, we
Intergalactic.
don't want
Yes.
them in there. We
We
don't need
can't.
them because
Yes.
we
Could you? Yeah.
can't. Ooh.
Because think about it. We were supposed to be like, the promise of America is
Uh-huh.
that we are the best of the best. And
Right.
so, yes, like in terms of like the species, the human species that you're going to want to invite to the council, you would assume that it would be Americans. And so, if we're the best of the best, dude,
Oh
do you know what I'm
dear.
saying? And that's why I'm
Oh.
saying, like, they were like, no, they can't come. They can't even handle themselves in different forms.
Oh, they
They're
can't come
not going to
sit
be
with
able to handle
us. No.
us.
Jeez. Oh,
You know what I mean?
this is interesting. Yeah, this
I
is a
know, girl.
good topic because yes, and then we are here. We are thinking we got it all, but even compared to other countries, we just really don't. We just don't
Yeah,
measure
like
up.
we really
We
don't.
just
And I
don't measure up. So
not
how would we
for
on a global and then on a
yes.
universal scale?
Because
No.
we were like, there's no way that you know how we feel about this, there's just no way that our country should look how it looks. I am in one of the easily kind of, I mean, yeah, the Bay Area is a moneyed area in California,
Uh-huh.
and I drive around in this place, and there are very few places, no matter where I'm at, that my cute little car isn't taking like hits from the damn gouges in the road, right?
Let's
Listen,
talk about it.
our bridges are
Ooh,
just
we.
collapsing. I mean, it's crazy, and it's like
Yes,
it's
yes.
so that's what I think. I really think that if you're really like taking it up a level and you are trying to partner with different beings because you're like, listen,
Oh,
it's time for us to come together. We've evolved past the galaxy being our
yes.
limit.
Oh
You're
gosh.
not going to look down on Earth and look down at America, and America is supposed to be the best they got.
Yeah. The best
And
they
really
got.
want to like they're so beyond us. They're like we've seen what we needed to see.
We got all we need. We can
We collected
recon.
enough evidence.
That's
Your
enough.
your girl's fine. They're never coming back for her.
That's
You
what I'm
know.
saying. I haven't talked to her in years, and I'd be wanting to ask her, like, girl, how's
No,
that going? How's that panning out for you?
I think
But yeah, I'm sure they probably left the building, and they won't be back. But
I
I'm
don't.
thinking about this, Stephanie. These alien. Okay, so like you said, talking about these potholes, right?
Yeah.
And also here in Southern California, it's a big thing in San Diego. There's this one street we just went down. We don't normally go down that street. We had to for some reason the other day, and it's just like a battlefield. When
Yeah.
I travel in the morning, it's like there's landmines just went off, and then after the rain, whatever, and they haven't evolved into how to mix rocks and concrete into a better formulation that they won't make potholes. Maybe they make the roads out of rubber, like they make the tires. I don't know, girl. I'm not an engineer.
I feel
I
like
didn't
in
claim to
some
be.
places they have, but you know what? Because here's the problem. Like America, I mean, okay, because I actually think it's one of the things that's crazy to me because we are, and I unfortunately because this podcast is kind of history, but it's also the current event hot takes. We
Mhm.
are going to be. We're just stuck because I don't understand anyone who would want their country to be what it used to be. Do you know what I mean?
Uh huh.
But
I do.
millions of Americans do. And that stumps me because
Oh yes. Okay.
I actually feel like when I think of the past, here's the thing. The
Ooh.
past is actually something that is like a dead thing. Do you know what
Okay.
I mean? Like the past is a dead thing. I think the present and the future are living things, right? And
Okay.
so to me, the past isn't supposed to be lived in, it's supposed to be learned from. And that's
Oh.
all you're supposed to do from what has occurred is learn from it so that you can apply it to the present and then ultimately the future. But the root of America is racism and it is capitalism. That's the root of America, right? And so both have been pretty damn lucrative for many, 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 many years, right? And so
Hmm.
it's like, if this has worked for me and I'm the one kind of running shit, this is how it's going to always work for me, even though for a lot of people, the way that they're living is other people's past. Does that make sense?
It does. It does make
And
sense.
so that's why I feel like we can't have nice things because we can't even move into the present. We're still being led by people living in the past. And so when I'm assuming this, but I mean, think about like the people in government. They're like 80 years old. They're as old as the Roswell Incident.
They are. They remember it well.
Do you know what I'm saying? So it's like,
Yes.
how could they even realize like that the roads that were built when they were born need to be replaced? Because they're not there. They haven't. They're not in
Yeah.
the present, right? To them,
Yeah.
everything is glorious. Everything's great. Like they're still making money. They're still in office. Like nothing's really changed for them. And
I
so
got
that's
it.
why I think is the
Mhm.
problem is we have, and I am just coming to terms with this because for the most part, I actually consider myself to be a moderate politically. Like I don't align either way. Y'all got to talk sweet to me and tell me what I need to hear. And that's typically
Okay.
how it would
Hmm.
work for me. But our system isn't set up that way. And so I have typically voted democratically, although not always. Sometimes I do declare Republican and vote Republican, but it's been a
Mm-hmm.
while since that's happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've just been thinking about the fact that I have given, to me, there's no real difference between them now, right? Because the establishments are both so old. It's like in order for us to get to a place where the aliens want to come back and hang out, we need people that are living not only in the present, but in the future
Yeah.
to be
Uh-huh.
governing the country. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I get it, like the forward thinking,
Yeah.
like we don't have that. We're just kind of like we're stuck. Well, it worked for 20 years, it worked for 40 years, it worked for
Yes.
50 years.
Yes.
Let's keep it going. Like again, that word again. Like
Yes.
we
That's
just need to
exactly
like take
right.
that all the way out of
That's
the
exactly
dictionary.
right.
We just should never do anything again. Shouldn't be done twice,
Yeah. Once is
thrice.
enough, GD.
Like
Once
once
is
is enough. We've done it. Let's go past that. Mhm. Yeah.
enough.
Yeah. So the aliens are
So yeah.
probably just saying they're doing shit again. Oh, here we go again. Oh,
That's why. That's why they're like, God, they had so much promise. And so that's what their history books look like. They're literally like their little alien kids are like, Mommy, tell me again about when the Americans were almost our allies. And then they talk about the 80s and 90s like us.
yeah. They were like, they were doing so good. They had it all. They had overcome racism. We didn't want to mess with them when they were all up in that.
Yeah,
Then
yeah.
they were battling it between themselves as human beings, and it was weird to us.
Oh, so yeah, that's what
We
they're
wanted no
worried
parts
about.
of it,
No
dear.
parts of
Trust
it.
me, you're better off.
You're better off. Yes.
Oh
And then they're
wow,
like, how about some light reading so you don't have nightmares, honey? And then they start
yeah.
telling them about, I don't know, Venus or something.
Oh wow.
Or maybe Mars. Do you think, so like in our galaxy, do you think that there's life on other planets within our galaxy?
Absolutely, because this is why I think this. And I think that if there's a creator and it was like depending on what which angle if you wanted to go with a god, you could say he made a whole bunch of mistakes. Or then you can say the Big Bang, the Big Bang. Because you can't I don't think anything can do without progression. And that's what we're talking about, right? We're talking about progression.
Yeah,
We're
yeah,
talking
yeah, yeah.
about God
We are.
creating a solar system and he was like, let me do this. Goo, 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 goo. How does this happen? Oh, there's two life forms. They can there's microorganisms, there's this there's biome, there's all this. Didn't quite work. Okay, can't sustain life, whatever, throw it away.
Oh.
This one, take it, do a couple of tweaks. Okay, this one's better. It has like, some kind of things going on, but just quite not really what I wanted. I wanted them to be able to think for themselves. And then I'm thinking he made some planets that had these beings on there that were just way, 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 way up here. And they were almost godlike
Gods.
creatures
Okay.
because he
Mm-hmm.
was making things in his image, right?
Yes. That's what I
So
believe I am. I mean, isn't
it's
that what
like,
they taught us?
I'm
Yeah.
thinking he did all these things, and they said he created the earth and the heavens and the earth in 7 days. So maybe on those 7 days, girl, he was just tricking around with stuff. But then there's also the Big Bang theory. It's
Gee,
tricking the
that
wrong
is
word. It
making
wasn't
me
just
laugh so much just thinking about God like tricking around.
tricking,
just just throwing some shit
tinkering.
at the
I don't know what the
wall,
word
seeing
is. Like
seeing what
just
sticks,
And then there's the
whiteboarding.
theory that was like the Big Bang, like stuff happened just all of a sudden, and things just
Mm.
split apart, and this one went this way, and this fractionated to this, and so whichever way you think, it still kind of was a reverberation, and it kind of
Mm-hmm.
echoed, and it kind of evolved
Mm-hmm.
into what it is now. So I
Mm-hmm.
do think that there's alien life forms. I think there's planets that aliens clearly live on. Maybe there's even stuff that we haven't discovered that we can see in our solar system that
Ooh,
is
yeah.
just too before
Oh,
our
wow, that
our
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 minds can't
eye
even
here and our eyes,
conceive.
we haven't even been
Yeah.
able to see. Just think about even too, we talked about this before, the heavens and the earth, and then there's
Yes.
also the oceans, because
Yes.
nobody's been able to discover that shit,
Yeah.
and they don't really want to, I don't think. So some stuff is like we can't even pinpoint where it came from. Did it come from the ocean? Just like
This is
that thing that I
yes.
saw above the lake. I'm like, where did it come from? Did it come from below? Did it come from above? I don't know. They
Well,
say
you
the
know, there
things.
was some chatter, yeah, some chatter around the fact that like whenever they were like we were starting to see kind of all these ships in the sky, there
Mhm.
was some chatter and it was like, well, maybe they're coming from the ocean, right? Like if you think about some of the creatures that just live there, it's quite possible that they've obviously been here with us the entire time, which isn't to say that there's not different species. Like I believe that I consider them extraterrestrial because for me that means that they have to come from like outside of the
Okay.
universe. But
Okay.
I do believe there are some alien beings that are living in that ocean, some of which we're never going to ever know about. Like, remember that the beautiful, was she called a sunfish? Ironically, like the fish that floated up to the light and died, and they're like the type of fish that are never supposed to be exposed to light. And as she's floating
Oh.
up, she's like killing herself because she's not like there she's a deep water fish and so she's
Uh-huh.
never seen light. And have you not heard of that story? Please, you have to look it up. It's so beautiful, and the fish is like this big, and they somehow caught it on camera. I think they were just exploring the seas and they're like, what the hell is that? And they're just watching this fish float up and knowing very well that as she's coming up, the pressure, everything is hurting her, but
Oh.
she floats up and then hits the beach and dies.
What?
I
I'm
cannot believe
not.
you have not heard of that.
I
Please look
need
it
to.
up.
I
I
will.
found
I
it
will.
to be one of the most beautiful stories. And a lot of, like, I think spiritualists were saying that it's a sign. It makes sense to me. It feels like it's very aligned with, like, the timing of some of the stuff that's going to happen. But just being privy to something that's never supposed to happen and it being this, to me, beautiful alien species was
Hmm.
chef's kiss. So I know that if she's down there, you know what I'm
There's some
saying?
other
There's some
things.
other
Yeah.
things down there. And here's okay, this is going to sound creepy AF. But if we're talking about underwater, I mean, you know how people will say that there's things like sirens that live underwater, and you know how, like, the lore in the Caribbean is like, just stay out of
Yeah.
the water.
Stay out
Do
of
you
the
know what I mean?
water at this
Like,
time to this time.
yes, like, so if there are, I mean, if
Mhm.
I don't know. I just always believe, especially when my people are telling a story, that it's from experience. That's the only reason we tell a story and keep it going is so that your ass learns. And I just have to
Yes.
believe that there's got to be
There's
some type of
some truth.
humanoid, yeah, thing down
They
there doing
also
something.
we're talking about the other day the Loch Ness monster, and they were saying that they were going to send like an expedition out to figure out what the DNA is in the water in Scotland. I
Mm-hmm.
remember growing up, I had a neighbor that lived across the street that was from Scotland that would go on these adventures to go find Nessie. He sure did.
Oh wow.
Um, and they would say like the lore around Scotland that there is like some kind of creature, some sea
Mm-hmm.
creature that's yay big, and they've seen it. It'll pop its head out, and then they were saying like, "Oh, it's not a sea creature. It's actually a submarine because look how this hook just goes a certain way at an
Mm-hmm.
angle." And so they haven't really figured that out yet, but people will say they've seen like the crest and then like a whole bunch of different like
Oh, like
scales and
curves or
things.
ridges. Oh wow.
Like going like
Yeah. Yeah.
in
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
So who
Yeah.
knows if
I
it's a
could
big ass eel? Who
It
knows?
could be because you've seen those damn. What are they? They're I don't even know what they're called. Those fish that live in like Thailand, like they'll surface and it's like they're literally like 12 feet long and like 5 feet wide. You've never seen those big ass fish, Kiki? Am I chronically online? Do I need to get my ass off?
Girl,
So
no,
bad.
girl. No, I think it's interesting. I probably have come across something like that, but yeah,
Oh yeah,
I
you
need
would.
to. You
You
need to
would
tell me
know.
about these things because I would love to hear about it. Of even
You
the
would
sunfish
know.
thing, I'm
It was
like,
the most
what? Where?
beautiful
How did
thing.
I miss
You
that?
are
Where
going to
have I
see the
been?
photos of us. And then mostly on TikTok. Maybe it's because I'm just on TikTok. But a lot of us were just having all these emotions because it was literally beautiful. It's not
Oh,
supposed to happen. And you could just see her. And there's all this blue water and just this black orb floating up. And you know she's
oh,
dying. You know that the closer she gets to the surface, the worse it feels for her, right? But for some reason, she just kept swimming to the sun and then hit the
oh.
beach and
She was
died.
like, I've got to see it.
I've got to
Oh,
see
maybe that was
it.
her life adventure.
It could have been. What's really interesting is I'm like, I wonder if that how it's we caught it, which is cool. But
Mm-hmm.
to me, it's like if it happens once, then
It's
it's got to be
happening.
happening regularly. Yeah, no,
Mm.
the sea is, I think, in terms of like aliens, I feel like the sea is like sea grade, like sea, like cat grade. You know what I mean? Like
Uh-huh.
lots of interesting stuff in there that we may never get to because hell, they're trying to burn it all down. May never get to see.
We
But I
are.
also feel like, I don't know, spaceman, like galaxies away, that there is just some cool space boogieing happen. And that
Yes.
humans, Americans specifically, ruin the chance for us to party with them.
Oh. Do you think they like our music? Do you think
Not
they have
anymore.
like